Welcome to today's podcast episode of Little by Little Homeschool. I am blessed and thrilled to be joined by Julie Bogart from Brave Writer today. So welcome, Julie.
Thanks for having me, Leigh. This is fun.
Yes, I'm super excited. I got some good questions. We're going to talk about writing and all kinds of things. But can you start off and share a little bit about yourself, introduce you to the listener?
Yeah, sure. So I am the mother of 5 adult kids. I have 3 grandchildren and a 4th on the way. I started working as a freelance writer in the 1990s, and I worked as a magazine editor, a ghostwriter, just a person who worked a lot with people who were writing. And as I began homeschooling my 5 kids, a lot of people had questions about how to teach writing, and one of my girlfriends actually asked me to help her teach her kids. And it was when I saw the curricula that she was using that I was like deeply discouraged that this was the kind of program that homeschoolers were using to teach their kids to write. I had grown up with a mother who wrote over 70 books. She's a well-regarded published author. And I had a completely different orientation to writing than the way schools taught it. Even though I went to school, I still had just a freedom in my own self-expression and a confidence in my own writing voice that seemed to be absent in so many other adults that I met, especially homeschool parents who were trying to teach writing to their kids. And so by the time the 2000s kind of got going, I was sort of known in homeschooling circles for my helpful writing advice, whether it was an email list or a homeschool discussion board. And so I put together a program called The Writer's Jungle, and I started my first online writing class through email in January of 2000, 25 years ago. And Brave Writer was really born at that time. And that is the company that I have started and continued with a team to teach writing to hundreds of thousands of families globally, and it's been really popular. So it's been a fun journey.
That's so neat how that started just out of just your knowing how to do this well and then seeing that in friends asking. I feel like the best companies and the best things start out of having a need and somebody saying, can you help me? And then you just grow from that. And
that's so true.
And just starting off with like an email list. That's so good. That's so good. And I know like I run into your stuff everywhere. So yeah, it's grown and it's been so helpful. But can we just kind of start here, just the fact that you call, the company, use the word brave. And in my own homeschool and with the homeschool moms I've worked with, there is such a fear. And it often paralyzes our children from writing. Now, I know you said you've helped a lot of people become brave writers. And can I ask, what is your opinion about why there's so much pushback when it comes to writing from kids?
Well, most of the time, the way writing is taught is as a performance for an audience of one. So if you think about school, you're not writing so that you're read, you're writing so that you get evaluated. And anytime we are asked to do something and the only purpose of it is evaluation, it strikes nerves in us. Imagine if you were a tennis player or a soccer player, and the only time you were allowed to get on the field was when you were in a competition, when you were actually in a match. You would never have sort of the freedom to work on your strokes or your kicks. You would never have the freedom to be helped by someone to help you perfect your skills. The goal of writing is the way I put it is this: writing is first for yourself and second for readers. And until we have self-expression as a resource for our own thinking and our own sense of identity and self, we will always outsource the words we put on the page to what we expect a teacher to give an A to. We're always going to be thinking, well, this teacher has words in mind. I've got to guess what they are and then get those on the page. We never start with ourselves, and that's very tiring. So kids fear writing. They also don't know how to do it because they really think that the words they need on that page live outside of them. And that feels like a magic trick. Like, how do I discover the words I don't have and get those onto paper?
Yeah, I've experienced all of those things and just all the things with 3 kids. And when I stepped back and allowed that, like what you're talking about, the tennis player, just giving them a lot of just practice. And I might not even read what you wrote. And
exactly.
Allow them just to write and then not evaluate even. Or when I did look at it, didn't nitpick it.
Yeah.
Just was like, ask questions like, oh, where can this go? Or we would write things together, and it just... Yeah, I think, a lot of that fear we can kind of put on. And I think the fear comes from us homeschool moms. We think we're going to miss out on it. We're thinking, okay, I have this 8-year-old and someday they're going to have to take the SATs and they're going to have to get into college. And if I don't do all these things right now, what would you say to that mom who's fearful of that?
Yeah, it's such a common fear. And it shows up in math too. There is just this feeling that if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to pass on my weakness to my child. But ironically, parents tend to double down on the very strategies that created this lack of confidence. So if you're an unconfident writer, you tend to double down on the aspects of writing that you aren't confident in. Maybe it's the mechanics, maybe it's the formats, maybe it's the structure of an essay, instead of asking a more significant question, which is, who created this anxiety in me? How did I end up with this fear as a grown adult? I tell the story. I have a new book coming out called Help My Kid Hates Writing. And I tell the story of this man that I met at a professional event a couple years ago. We were sitting at a table, and this happens a lot for me. I go to these business sort of networking events in Cincinnati, and I will ask them, what's your business? And this guy was 69 years old. He had built multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses in his lifetime. And then he says to me, what's your business? And I'm like, well, I teach writing to homeschoolers, which that doesn't sound the same, right? Those are not in the same universe. He said, oh, well, that's interesting. What do you mean you teach it? And I explained to him that when we teach writing in our classes, we enroll the parent and the child together to create this editor-writer connection, like to create a relationship between the parent and the child so that the child will feel loved and supported in their writing experience. And he immediately said, oh, I wish I had had that. And I said, oh, well, tell me more about that. And he got tears in his eyes and started describing how when he was a kid, he wrote a paper that got an A for content, but an F in grammar. And it was a story he was really proud of. His mother had read it. His friends had read it. But that F so stayed with him that even at age 69, he still would not handwrite on a whiteboard in front of his board of directors. He would not text with his own fingers. He dictated every letter to a secretary. He was afraid to send emails that he typed because he was so afraid he'd make a mistake and it would be humiliating. And I thought, wow, this guy is completely successful in business, and yet he's created workarounds for himself for his entire adult life because the humiliation is so powerful. And while we were sitting there, I watched him just dissolve into a 10-year-old kid right in front of my eyes. It's that experience that I don't want for our children. And as a home educating parent, you don't have to create those conditions. You can actually heal the broken or damaged writer in you while you're supporting the growth of your young writers. And that's really what Brave Writer's all about.
That's beautiful, because really a lot of homeschool comes from our attitude as homeschool moms and how we come into it. If we're bringing stress and we're bringing fear and we have worry, it really carries down to our children. And that a lot of that does come from school and from past times of having to perform for something and it not meeting up very well. I found for myself, I had a blog for a while, and for me, that was actually fun writing.
Yes.
I actually started to have fun with it. And it allowed me then to realize that there were so many different ways for my kids to write, as opposed to just having to have them write an essay, which, yes, there are times for essays. I know you say that too. But let's just have a little bit of fun with it to kind of get them into, I guess, to give them that confidence.
Well, and if you think about the essay format, it only lasts for 8 years of your life. It's 4 years of high school and maybe 4 years of college if you go. If you go into grad school, you're choosing that for yourself. It means you like writing, right? But for most of us, the essay format is just a tool of evaluation that academics have created to make it easier for themselves to see if their students are retaining what they're being taught. But most of our writing lives, 90% of our lives, if we live till age 80, so only 10% of your life is essays. The rest of it is emails, text messages, social media posts, Christmas letters. We write for all kinds of reasons. A eulogy, your wedding vows. These are things that are meaningful. And if you don't have access to your own vocabulary and sense of self in writing, you're actually going to feel like limited when someone calls on you to give a presentation or a talk. You won't even know how to start. And so much of writing needs to just be restored to the notion of self-expression. That's why I say we write for ourselves first. I find that sometimes I'm thinking what I think is a brilliant thought while I'm in the shower. And the moment I go to write about it, I notice that actually there are all these limits to my thinking. And they didn't show up until I tried to wrestle that thought down into written language. That's the power of writing. Writing helps us really work through our own thoughts. But students have been taught that they're supposed to guess somebody else's thoughts. And that's what makes writing hard. Nobody wants to spend writing guessing what someone else would put on the page. So yeah, have fun with it, but also like it should be as available to a person as speech. And they really are from the same source. It's the internal language, the thoughts in your head generate both speech and writing.
That right there would give a lot of freedom to kids, because we know kids have a lot of thoughts going on, and a lot of kids, even young ones, there's no inner monologue, or dialogue. There's everything that is in their head comes out, and you get to hear all of it. And a lot of them have so many great stories and fun things, and I think we can kind of capitalize on that. So I know that you've mentioned, I've read some of your books, but you have your latest book is called Help My Kids Hate Writing, and it's all about empowering parents to help their child grow as a writer. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's one of the books I sort of resisted writing because I felt like I had said everything I wanted to say about writing in my program, in Brave Writer itself. But when I was meeting with my editor, and The Brave Learner was such a successful book, and so was Raising Critical Thinkers, and they were like, are you sure you don't want like a book to encapsulate your pedagogy? And I really started thinking about it that, it's one thing to adopt a curriculum, right? You go in, you read the directions, you try and implement the ideas and activities. But sometimes it's actually really helpful to read through a whole philosophy with examples and storytelling and information that gives you the confidence to implement this curriculum that feels so different than anything you've learned before. One of the ways that I approach writing and that I try to make clear in this book is the way professional writers teach writing to people who want to get paid to be writers. And that to me is the missing link in writing instruction. If we treated kids as though they're writing for entertainment, to create connections with themselves and with readers, they start to actually look forward to writing. And so I give lots of examples inside this book. I decided to orient the book towards the hardest cases, kids who say, I hate writing. But even if your kid likes writing, you will find so much in this book that's really useful and beneficial to those kids as well. For instance, I'll give you an example. I approach revision completely differently than the way schools do. Schools treat revision like this big repair project, right? Your child turns something in. They've done the very best they can. They've dredged up language. They've put it in a format. They've punctuated and spelled it as best they can. And then the teacher comes back and says, but why didn't you do it this way? That is just so demoralizing. You're like, I gave you my best and you're telling me I should have thought even better. That's a horrible feeling. When revision is seen as an improvement project, kids don't even want to try. They feel like their first best effort will be missed. In Brave Writer, I like revision to be under the power of the writer, and it needs to be seen as something you do after you've gotten your best effort out and as something that you have total control over. But before you're willing to improve your own writing, you have to be willing to change it, to mess with it, to see that it could have possibilities. And so one of the tactics we do in Brave Writer is called low stakes revision. And this is just a strategy meant to give kids the courage to mess with their writing, not to make it better, just to change it. So a good example would be asking your student to take a die and roll it. And let's say it rolls the number 4. And you say, find 4 adjectives in this piece and change them to any other adjective. Doesn't even have to make better sense. Just change it. Another strategy is You've written this piece in the first person, and now you decide to write it from the perspective of the dog that was in the room. So you're changing it by adding another perspective. Another change might be just introducing an item that wasn't in the original. How would that impact this story if an item was changed? Another one is to lie. Change all of the storylines so that it's not true anymore. How much do you change? Do you change the verb tenses? Do you change the first person to second person? Do you have it in the afternoon instead of the morning? Like, you have jurisdiction over all the changes. By giving our kids the opportunity to be playful with their writing, to make changes just for the sake of seeing what it sounds and feels like to do that, you start to grow the skill of revision. Instead of using revision as a tool to make people feel bad about not doing a better job from the beginning.
I feel like this book might, and all those tools and all those examples you gave would be good for adults even. If there are
totally.
Adults who want to maybe get into writing, maybe blog writing, with all this like regular writing, or writing their Christmas card better.
100%.
Like
I mean, truly.
Yeah, what a way. That's just, my mind is blown, and just would totally take down defenses, because that's what I find. Kids get defensive about writing, and because I feel like sometimes it can be a little, like, we're math, 2 + 2 = 4. Well, I mean, you can argue with me so much about that. It's still going to be 1 + 1 = 2. It's still going to be that. But with the writing, they would try to argue with me about it, and they just would get very defensive about it. But just saying, just change it. You're making it, I feel like young kids especially would think that was fun, and teens would probably find it less intimidating, less like you're coming down on them.
My teenagers love it. I've done it in workshops with teenagers multiple times, and their whole facial expressions change, because what are you doing? You're giving them power tools. You're literally saying, try out all these tools. See what happens when you use them. If we think about how we taught people, let's say, to sew using a sewing machine, and I realize that's really rare anymore, but I highly recommend it. Sewing machines are super fun for kids. But when you're teaching them how, we don't start with like a prom dress pattern on some kind of, satin fabric. We start with scrap fabric, and we teach them to use the zigzag button to make the zigzags really big, make them really tiny. We talk about going forward and backward. We teach them buttonholing. We show them how to go around a corner. And you do all of that on scrap fabric, right? You're just playing with the machine. You're seeing how you can control the pedal. That's what's missing in writing instruction. There's so little playfulness. There's so little just do it for the sake of experience. And that's what I really encourage. And so the same thing with free writing, which is sort of the hallmark of Brave Writer. Free writing is learning how to get the hand hooked up with the brain so that your hand can take dictation from your own mind. It's just listening to the ticker tape of thoughts go by and getting them down with your own hand. Well, that means any thought. Like, why is my mom making me do this? I'm stuck. This is stupid. I hate writing. I wish I wasn't homeschooled. I have a crush on that boy. Like, literally whatever is in your brain is blocking the thing you want to write about. So just write about that. Start to get to know the landscape of your thinking through writing, and stop being so oriented towards this ridiculous essay. And let me be clear, essays are boring. When was the last time you read one for pleasure? The structure of the format that we call the essay in school has one purpose. It's to show your teacher the journey through your research and your conclusions. That's it. It's not meant to be galvanizing writing. I would much rather, I used to say this all the time, but I throw it out with a caveat now just because social media is so different than it used to be. But my best writing students spend a lot of time online, because they have immediate audiences who are giving them feedback, and they're looking for ways to be funny, to be insightful, to have an argument that's better than somebody else's, because all of us are motivated by writing back. We aren't just motivated to write and then get a grade. We want engagement. And so the best writing comes from that impulse. And so we want to grow it and train it in our own families, and we can.
The story you're talking about, just write whatever's in your head. Why do I have to write this? I don't like writing. I don't like homeschool. I want to go outside. Like, I literally have had that with kids. Like, just write whatever you want. Especially, I think my daughter loved to write, and I never had to anything with her. And I have found, and I've shared this before on the podcast, that my older son, once I moved him away from just that kind of essay type of writing and let him just write. Like, he can write a business plan. He can write all the stuff. He can write social media posts, emails. He can write all the things to run his business. But he's like, why would I? When he found his purpose in writing.
Yes.
Then he has no problem writing those types of things. And so now my 17-year-old, he's really finally kind of getting a little more into, I really did pull back a bit with him because there was just so much. And now he's like, I can't wait to show you what I was doing for writing.
Amazing.
And I also found with him, he doesn't like to handwrite. He likes to type it. I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can type it out and email it to me. If that's what works, then
who handwrites anything anymore? Literally, I don't even get to sign my own contracts for books. They send them on DocuSign. Like, it's not, the world is changing. And there are a lot of questions out there about whether or not the physical act of handwriting is essential to growing as a reader and as a writer. And I think the jury is out on this, even though you'll find very opinionated articles saying that it's necessary. But we do not yet have a generation that's been raised on just computer and typing. Handwriting is still a huge chunk of us who've been educated in the traditional school system, but that is literally going away so rapidly. So I don't know if forming the symbols with a pencil will matter, especially in an era with voice to text. I mean, as it is, I already just voice to text my texts, not because I don't know how to spell, but I'm trying to preserve my fingers. There's also quite a bit of like repeated stress injury, carpal tunnel, all of those things that are coming from typing, handwriting, all of it, because the truth is we're producing more writing for publication today than in the history of the world. More children are writing today than ever before. And that's really an important thing to recognize. So if they're happy to write and the way the world is writing is changing, I think it behooves us to embrace that, not just to fight it.
Yes, there's a lot. Yeah, lots of changing with technology, and yes, we have to embrace it and look at how we can use it and prepare our kids also for the future. It's like, why have him handwrite this out if he's going to be typing? He loves technology. He loves that kind of stuff. But before we close, I want to ask you a personal question about your homeschool. Can you share a favorite homeschool memory with us?
Oh, yeah, for sure. When my son Noah was in 4th grade, we went through a period where I was trying to really structure his education. And so I had, he was my oldest, so I had this lesson planner and I color coded it and I put stickers on it and I wrote him love notes thinking that would help. And there was this day where he woke up in the morning and he told me he hated his life. And it really broke my heart because I felt like, oh, we're finally clicking. We're doing this thing. But it was suffocating to him. And I met with this education specialist in California. I was living there at the time. And she was telling me about this brain research that says we can really invest ourselves deeply in one subject at a time, that the way school is structured is actually not conducive to the way brains learn. And so that really got my attention. And the next thing on our agenda was to study the California Gold Rush. And so I dropped everything else. And all we did was read books. We went to Knott's Berry Farm and went digging for gold. We did all this stuff and all of a sudden realized we could throw a party, a Gold Rush party, and invite homeschool families to it. So I taught my son how to sew. We bought flannel shirts from Goodwill and cut them up for fabric and made little Gold Rush bags. We had a sluice. We had panning for gold with fool's gold in a great big sandbox. We made franks and beans. He drew a map of Sutter's Creek and we played pin the gold nugget on Sutter's Creek. We traded in the gold for sarsaparilla and licorice at the camp store. We sang Oh Susanna. We had frank and beans. Everybody dressed up in their, camp gear. And that was like a massive turning point in our homeschool for me. We just went all in for like 6 weeks on one thing, and it involved literally everything. It involved math, crafts, handwriting, history, geography, throwing a party, hospitality, learning to sew, like all in 6 weeks. It was the richest learning we had ever done, and that shaped me for the rest of my homeschool career.
And how many years later, that is still what you remember? And Have you asked him if he remembers details?
Oh,
about
he
that
totally
story?
remembers it. Yeah. And it is funny because they don't remember everything, but that they totally remember. Like my whole family and even the families we invited remember it. It was a very imprinting experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime you dive deep into something,
Yes.
and it's just but the constant, 15 minutes for this, or we have a bell until it rings till we do this.
Yes.
Otherwise, we don't get as deep into it. So that's a beautiful story and an example of how we can do homeschool, how we can school. We don't have to do the school at home, how we can do this education at home differently and make a really big impact upon our kids. So thank you for that story. That was great.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Can you share with the listener where they can connect more with you, hear more, find out more about your books? Where can they get all that stuff?
Yeah. Well, that story that I just shared is really kind of the foundation for The Brave Learner, which is my book that really articulates a whole pedagogy around education at home. And my author website, juliebogartwriter.com, has all my books on it. BraveWriter.com is our curriculum and homeschool materials for writing. And then I have a new Substack called Brave Learning with Julie Bogart. And every day we try to publish like supportive articles. I have a podcast for kids on there called The Monday Morning Meeting, where I give them a 5-minute pep talk and an activity to do for the week. So those are ways that you can find me. On Instagram, I'm Julie Brave Writer, and that's on Threads as well.
Well, thank you. I thank you for just staying in the homeschool world and encouraging homeschool moms, and just this, because this area of writing can be, and just your whole philosophy about education and learning is all very helpful. But thank you for
Leigh,
continuing to encourage us, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes, and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.